Dearest listeners, one must confess that society adores nothing more than a wager between gentlemen, particularly when it involves the matrimonial prospects of an unsuspecting lady. Today, your humble chronicler brings you the most deliciously scandalous tale of a duke who believed himself capable of manufacturing love like one might commission a new waistcoat, and the remarkable spinster who taught him that hearts cannot be won through stratagems alone. But let us not rush, for the best stories, like the finest port after dinner, require time to reveal their true character. Miss Amelia Westbrook stood at the periphery of Lady Pemberton's ballroom, her position as familiar as the Chinese wallpaper that decorated the vast chamber. 5 seasons. 5 interminable seasons she had graced, or perhaps haunted would be the more accurate term, the marriage mart of London society. At 27, she had achieved that peculiar status reserved for those ladies who had transgressed the invisible boundary between selective and shelf-bound. The soft mint green of her evening gown, chosen by her well-meaning mama to complement her auburn hair, seemed to render her even more invisible against the painted silk walls. It was a talent she had perfected over the years, this ability to blend into the scenery like a chameleon of the Tun. Not that she was uncomely. Indeed, the astute observer would note the intelligence that sparkled in her hazel eyes, the pleasing symmetry of her features, and the grace with which she held herself despite her circumstances. Her father, Sir Reginald Westbrook, possessed a respectable baronetcy and an estate in Hampshire that provided a comfortable £4,000 per annum. It was neither fortune enough to attract the fortune hunters, nor pittance enough to excuse her from participation in the social whirl. She existed in that peculiar purgatory of the gently bred, too well born to accept a match beneath her station, yet not sufficiently endowed to overcome what society had deemed her fatal flaw. That flaw, as the gossips never tired of whispering behind their fans, was her unfortunate tendency toward intelligence. Miss Westbrook read Latin. She solved mathematical equations for amusement. She had been discovered, on more than one occasion, engaged in political discourse with gentlemen who had made the mistake of treating her as more than a decorative ornament. Such behavior had earned her the dreaded epithet of blue-stocking, that kiss of death to any young lady's matrimonial prospects. Her mother, dear Lady Westbrook, maintained an admirable optimism that would have been touching were it not so painfully misguided. Even now she could be observed across the ballroom, her peacock feathers bobbing enthusiastically as she attempted to catch the eye of any eligible gentleman who might be persuaded to dance with her daughter. The poor woman had not yet accepted what Amelia had understood by her 3rd season. She was destined for spinsterhood, and there was a certain freedom in accepting one's fate. From her vantage point near the potted palms, Amelia observed the swirling masses of silk and superfine, the intricate patterns of social dance that had nothing to do with the actual dancing. She knew every player in this grand performance, the desperate mamas with daughters in their first bloom, the rakish gentlemen who prowled the edges seeking their next conquest, the debutantes fresh from the schoolroom with their dreams still intact, and the fortune hunters whose eyes gleamed with avarice rather than affection. It was while engaged in this familiar pastime that she first noticed the attention of His Grace, the Duke of Winterbourne. Not directed at her, naturally. Dukes did not notice wallflowers unless they happened to trip over them, but rather focused on a cluster of gentlemen near the cardroom entrance. Nicholas Winterbourne, at 35, remained one of the most eligible bachelors in England, despite what some considered his advanced years for a first marriage. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of midnight and eyes like Arctic ice, he possessed that particular combination of aristocratic hauteur and dangerous charm that caused debutantes to swoon and their mamas to scheme. The Duke's reputation preceded him like a herald announcing royalty. He was known for 3 things: his vast fortune that included estates in 4 counties, his complete indifference to the matchmaking machinations of the Tun, and his uncanny ability to predict which young ladies would make the most advantageous matches each season. This last talent had earned him the sobriquet, the Duchess Maker, though it was whispered that he had never once been wrong in his predictions. As Providence would have it, at that very moment, the Duke was engaged in a conversation that would alter the course of both their lives, though neither party could have imagined such an outcome. Lord Marlborough's card room reeked of brandy and hubris, that particular masculine atmosphere where fortunes changed hands with the flip of a card and reputations could be made or destroyed over a glass of port. The Duke of Winterbourne lounged in his chair with the casual elegance of one born to command, his long fingers toying with a crystal tumbler as his companions engaged in their favorite pastime, dissecting the current crop of marriageable misses. Lord Hartley, a corpulent gentleman whose waistcoat strained admirably against its buttons, had just finished regaling the company with his prediction that the Mortimer chit would be engaged before month's end. Lord Cunningham countered with his certainty that Miss Fairweather would capture the Earl of Bromley, despite her modest dowry. It was then that young Lord Ashwood, fresh from university and still naive enough to challenge his betters, made the observation that would prove fateful. The young lordling suggested, with the confidence of one who had yet to learn the dangers of speaking carelessly in such company, that surely the Duke's famed ability to predict successful matches extended only to those ladies already possessed of the necessary attractions, beauty, breeding, or fortune. Any fool, he proclaimed, could predict that a diamond of the first water would make a splendid match. The true test of skill would be to elevate someone truly hopeless, someone like, and here he gestured through the open doorway toward the ballroom, that Westbrook creature who had been gathering dust for 5 seasons. A hush fell over the assembled gentlemen. One simply did not challenge the Duke of Winterbourne, not unless one wished to face either his legendary temper or, worse, his icy disdain. But something flickered in those Arctic eyes, something that might have been amusement or perhaps simple boredom seeking relief. The Duke rose from his chair with fluid grace, moved to the doorway, and surveyed the ballroom with the calculating gaze of a general examining a battlefield. His eyes found Miss Westbrook in her accustomed corner, partially hidden behind a potted palm, observing the festivities with the detached air of one who had long since ceased to be a participant. She wore mint green, a color that might have been becoming on another woman but seemed designed to help her disappear into the decor. The astute observer would note how she held her dance card, pristine, unmarked, a white flag of social surrender. Winterbourne studied her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then, with the slight smile that had been known to make lesser men nervous, he turned back to his companions. The challenge, he declared, was accepted. Within 1 month, before the midsummer ball that traditionally marked the end of the London season, he would see Miss Amelia Westbrook not merely engaged, but engaged to a peer of the realm. Furthermore, he would accomplish this feat without employing her dowry, her family connections, or any artificial inducement beyond his own social manipulation. The stakes were set at an astronomical sum, £10,000, enough to purchase a small estate or ruin a gentleman of modest means. Lord Ashwood, suddenly aware of the magnitude of his provocation, attempted to demur, but the die was cast. The other gentleman, scenting blood in the water, insisted the wager be recorded in the betting book at White's, that most sacred of gentlemen's clubs where such matters were inscribed for posterity. But there was one additional condition that the Duke himself imposed, one that would prove more significant than any monetary consideration. Should he fail, should Miss Westbrook remain unengaged by the appointed date, he would not merely forfeit the money. He would also pledge to dance the first dance at the next season's opening ball with the lady of Lord Ashwood's choosing, effectively declaring his interest in whoever that might be. For a man who had spent 15 years avoiding the matchmaking plots of ambitious mamas, it was a fate worse than financial ruin. The assembled gentlemen dispersed to spread word of this extraordinary wager, as men of their ilk were wont to do, ensuring that by the next morning there would be hardly a drawing-room in Mayfair that had not heard some version of the tale. The Duke of Winterbourne, that most elusive of matrimonial prizes, had finally engaged himself in the marriage mart, albeit in the most unconventional manner possible. Nicholas himself remained in the card-room a moment longer, contemplating the task before him. He had built his reputation on understanding the intricate dance of society, on predicting which partnerships would flourish and which would founder. He knew the power of a well-placed word, the impact of the right introduction, the way a single dance could alter a lady's prospects. What he had not anticipated was the strange flutter of anticipation that stirred in his chest as he considered Miss Westbrook, not as a challenge to be conquered, but as a puzzle to be solved. The lady in question, blissfully unaware of her newfound status as the subject of the season's most shocking wager, had decided that she had fulfilled her social obligation for the evening. She made her way along the edge of the ballroom, avoiding eye contact with the few gentlemen who might feel obligated to request a dance out of pity, a fate worse than being ignored entirely. Her mother intercepted her near the entrance, disappointment written clearly across her still handsome features, though she attempted to hide it behind maternal concern. Lady Westbrook suggested, with forced brightness, that perhaps Amelia might enjoy some air on the terrace. It was code, of course, for placing herself in the path of eligible gentlemen who might be taking a respite from the heat of the ballroom. Amelia acquiesced, as she always did, though she knew the terrace would be occupied by couples seeking privacy for conversations that skirted the edge of propriety, and she would be as out of place there as she was everywhere else. As she stepped into the cool evening air, she could not have known that the Duke of Winterbourne was already formulating his campaign, approaching her situation with the same strategic mind he applied to his vast business enterprises and estate management. In his experience, every woman wanted something: security, status, love, freedom. The key to his success would be discovering what Miss Amelia Westbrook truly desired and then creating circumstances where marriage would provide it. The following morning brought with it the usual parade of calling cards and gossip that followed any significant social event. In the breakfast room of the Westbrook townhouse on Brook Street, an atmosphere of barely suppressed excitement prevailed. Lady Westbrook, typically resigned to her daughter's social invisibility, clutched a card as though it were a sacred relic. The Duke of Winterbourne had called. Not only had he called, but he had left his card, that small rectangle of pristine white that indicated his intention to further the acquaintance. For a family that had grown accustomed to being overlooked, it was as shocking as a royal summons. Amelia regarded the card with deep suspicion. In 5 seasons, she had developed a finely tuned sense for social machinations, and this reeked of ulterior motive. Dukes did not suddenly notice wallflowers without reason. Either he had confused her with someone else, unlikely given his legendary attention to detail, or there was something at play that she did not yet understand. Her suspicions were not allayed when, that very afternoon during the fashionable hour, she encountered His Grace while taking her constitutional in Hyde Park. The meeting appeared entirely coincidental. The Duke was riding his magnificent black stallion along Rotten Row when he spotted the Westbrook ladies and immediately dismounted to pay his respects. Yet Amelia noticed how his groom seemed unsurprised by the stop, how the Duke's greeting, while perfectly proper, held an undertone of purpose. Winterbourne engaged Lady Westbrook in conversation about the weather, the previous evening's entertainment, and the upcoming social calendar with such skill that the older woman barely noticed how he gradually steered the discussion toward her daughter's interests. Within minutes, he had extracted the information that Miss Westbrook enjoyed reading, preferred the country to town, and had a particular fondness for astronomy. This last detail causing his eyes to light with what appeared to be genuine interest. He mentioned quite casually that he had recently acquired a new telescope for his observatory at Winterbourne House, one of the finest instruments available, crafted by the renowned Dolland firm. Perhaps, he suggested with perfect propriety, the ladies might enjoy viewing it during his upcoming scientific soiree. It was to be a small gathering, he assured them, focused on intellectual pursuits rather than the usual social peacocking. Lady Westbrook accepted with an alacrity that would have been embarrassing had Amelia not been too stunned to fully process what was happening. The Duke of Winterbourne, the most sought-after bachelor in England, had just invited them to his home. Not to a ball where they would be lost among hundreds, but to an intimate gathering where their presence would be noted and commented upon. As the Duke remounted his horse and took his leave, tipping his hat with a smile that seemed to hold secrets, Amelia found herself studying his retreating figure. There was something different about his manner toward her, not the dismissive politeness she was accustomed to from gentlemen, nor the predatory interest that occasionally surfaced from fortune hunters who had miscalculated her dowry. This was something else entirely, something that made her feel as though she were a particularly interesting book he had decided to read. The scientific soiree, held 3 evenings hence, exceeded even Amelia's most cautious expectations. Winterbourne House in Grosvenor Square was a testament to generations of wealth and taste, its rooms filled with treasures from around the globe. But it was the library that truly captured her attention. A magnificent chamber rising 2 stories, its walls lined with volumes that made her fingers itch to explore. The gathering was small, as promised, but the guest list had been curated with obvious care. Lord Pemberton, the noted antiquarian; Mrs. Somerville, the Scottish science writer whose translations of Laplace had earned her acclaim despite her sex; Sir Humphrey Davy, the chemist whose experiments with electricity had captivated the scientific community. These were people who spoke of ideas rather than fashion, who debated theories rather than gossip. And at the center of it all was the Duke himself, revealing a side of his character that society rarely glimpsed. Here was not the cold, calculating aristocrat of the ton's imagination, but a man of genuine intellectual curiosity who could discuss Newton's principles with the same ease he displayed on the dance floor. When he led the small group to his observatory on the roof, his enthusiasm for the celestial bodies was almost boyish. Amelia found herself standing beside the great telescope, the Duke adjusting the instrument to show her the rings of Saturn. As she peered through the eyepiece, gasping at the magnificent sight, she became aware of his presence beside her. Not pressing, not inappropriate, but somehow significant. He spoke of the cosmos with a poetry that surprised her, describing the dance of planets and moons in terms that reminded her why she had fallen in love with astronomy in the first place. For a moment, she forgot that she was the wallflower of 5 seasons, forgot that she had no business capturing the attention of a duke. She spoke freely of her own observations, her theories about the newly discovered series, her fascination with William Herschel's work. And Winterbourne listened, truly listened, as though her words held value beyond mere politeness. It was only later, as the Westbrook carriage carried them home through the gaslit streets, that Amelia's natural skepticism reasserted itself. No man changed his nature so completely without reason. The Duke of Winterbourne, who had ignored her existence for 5 years, had not suddenly discovered her charms. There was a game being played here, and she was determined to discover its rules before she became its victim. The revelation came, as such things often do, from an unexpected source. Miss Charlotte Featherstone, a young lady in her 2nd season with more beauty than discretion, approached Amelia at the Duchess of Richmond's musical evening with the barely concealed glee of one about to impart delicious gossip. The betting book at White's, she whispered behind her fan, contained the most extraordinary wager. The Duke of Winterbourne had bet £10,000 that he could see the hopeless Miss Westbrook engaged to appear within a month. The entire ton was abuzz with speculation. Would he succeed? Who would be the sacrifice? How could even the influential Duke manage such a miracle? Charlotte delivered this news with the casual cruelty of one who had never faced social rejection, never stood against a wall watching others dance, never been the subject of pitying looks and whispered comments. She expected Amelia to be devastated, perhaps to retreat in tears, certainly to be grateful for the warning. Instead, Amelia smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Everything crystallized in that moment. The sudden attention, the carefully orchestrated meetings, the invitation to exclusive gatherings where eligible gentlemen just happened to be present. She was not a woman to him, but a wager, not a person, but a problem to be solved. The astronomy evening, which she had treasured as a moment of genuine connection, now seemed like nothing more than strategic manipulation. The initial flash of hurt, and it did hurt, more than she cared to admit, quickly transformed into something far more dangerous: cold, calculated fury. The Duke of Winterbourne thought her a puppet to dance to his tune. He believed that 5 seasons on the shelf had made her desperate enough to accept any attention, no matter how false. He would learn otherwise. If His Grace wanted to play games with her future, she would ensure he paid dearly for his entertainment. The next morning, Amelia began her campaign with the methodical precision of a general preparing for war. She had advantages that the Duke might not expect. 5 years of observing society had taught her its weaknesses, its hypocrisies, and most importantly, its hunger for scandal. She also had something that her wallflower status had inadvertently provided: the trust of other overlooked women who shared secrets freely in her presence, never considering her important enough to be dangerous. Her first move was subtle. At Lady Fairfax's garden party, she allowed herself to be overheard expressing surprise at the Duke's sudden interest, wondering aloud if his well-known aversion to marriage had finally been overcome by financial difficulties. After all, she mused to her carefully chosen audience of gossips, why else would a man of his standing suddenly pay court to a woman he had ignored for 5 years, unless he needed her modest dowry to cover some embarrassment? The whisper spread like wildfire through the town. Within days, speculation about the Duke's finances became the dominant topic in drawing rooms across Mayfair. His every action was scrutinized for signs of economy. When he purchased a new pair of matched greys at Tattersall's, it was seen as desperate bravado. When he declined to bid on a painting at Christie's, it was taken as proof of his pecuniary embarrassment. Winterbourne, meanwhile, continued his campaign seemingly unaware of the rumors swirling around him. He appeared at every event Amelia attended, always managing to position himself as her partner for the supper dance or to escort her to the refreshment table. He introduced her to influential hostesses, praised her intelligence to powerful matrons, and generally employed the considerable force of his social position to elevate her status. And Amelia played along beautifully. She accepted his attentions with precisely calibrated responses, enough encouragement to keep him invested in his wager, but never quite enough to secure the engagement he sought. When he hinted at deeper feelings, she redirected the conversation to intellectual topics. When he attempted to arrange private moments, she ensured they were always interrupted. But her masterstroke came at the Countess of Jersey's ball, exactly 1 week before the deadline of the wager. The Countess of Jersey's annual ball was always the pinnacle of the season, an invitation to which could secure one's social standing for the year. That Amelia had received one was entirely due to the Duke's machinations, a fact that only strengthened her resolve. She arrived wearing a gown of deep sapphire blue, a bold departure from her usual pastels, one that Lady Westbrook had protested but Amelia had insisted upon. If she was to be the center of attention, she would dress the part. The transformation was remarkable. The color brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes and complemented her auburn hair magnificently. For perhaps the first time in 5 seasons, heads turned when she entered, not with pity or dismissive glances, but with genuine interest. The wallflower had become, if not a diamond, at least a sapphire worthy of notice. Winterbourne was already present, resplendent in evening dress that emphasized his tall, athletic frame. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, certainly, but also something else, something that looked almost like genuine admiration. He immediately moved to claim her hand for the first dance, a waltz that would signal to all society his serious intentions. But Amelia had other plans. Before the Duke could reach her, she accepted the hand of Lord Ashwood, the very young lord who had initiated the wager. The poor boy nearly stammered his request, clearly uncomfortable with his role in the scheme, but Amelia's warm smile put him at ease. As they took their position for the waltz, she could feel Winterbourne's gaze burning into her back. The dance with Lord Ashwood was strategic in multiple ways. First, it publicly aligned her with the Duke's opponent in the wager, a clear signal that she was aware of the game being played. Second, it allowed her to extract, with careful questions and sympathetic smiles, additional details about the wager that even Charlotte Featherstone had not known. The most crucial piece of information was this: the Duke had not merely wagered on her engagement to appear, but had specifically stated he would do so without using any artificial inducement beyond his social influence. He could not offer money, threaten scandal, or promise favor. He could only use persuasion and manipulation of circumstances. Armed with this knowledge, Amelia executed the second phase of her plan. For the remainder of the evening, she danced with every gentleman who asked, and thanks to the Duke's efforts to improve her social standing, there were many. She was charming, witty, and engaged in a way she had never been before. It was as though 5 seasons of observation had been preparation for this performance. The Duke watched from the edges of the ballroom, his expression growing progressively darker as the evening wore on. When he finally managed to claim her for the supper dance, the last of the evening and traditionally the most significant. His control was clearly fraying. They moved through the patterns of the cotillion in tense silence at first. Then, as the dance brought them together for a promenade, he spoke in low tones meant only for her ears. He complimented her transformation, her sudden social success, the way she had captivated the room. His words were perfectly proper, but there was an undercurrent of frustration, perhaps even hurt, that surprised her. The music drew to a close, and as he led her toward the supper room, Amelia made her move. In a voice carefully pitched to carry to nearby ears, she thanked him for his kind attention these past weeks. She expressed how grateful she was for his friendship, emphasizing the word in a way that made several matrons exchange knowing looks. Then, with devastating sweetness, she mentioned how wonderful it was that he felt comfortable enough with her to practice his courtship skills, since everyone knew he had no intention of actually marrying. The blow landed perfectly. Within minutes, the interpretation spread through the supper room. The Duke of Winterbourne had been using poor Miss Westbrook as practice for courting someone else entirely. How cruel! How typical of these rakish gentlemen. Poor dear Miss Westbrook, handling the situation with such dignity. Winterbourne's jaw tightened, but he could say nothing without creating more of a scene. He escorted her to the supper table with perfect propriety, but she could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge. When he left her with her mother and Lady Fairfax, his bow was precise, controlled, and somehow dangerous. 3 days remained before the midsummer ball and the conclusion of the wager. 3 days in which the Duke's reputation had been thoroughly savaged by gossip, his intentions questioned, and his character impugned. He had become, through Amelia's careful orchestration, the villain of the piece, the heartless aristocrat toying with the feelings of a spinster for sport. Yet he did not withdraw. If anything, his attention intensified. He called every morning, sent flowers every afternoon, and appeared at every event she attended. But now there was something different in his manner. A grimness, a determination that had nothing to do with charm and everything to do with will. The penultimate day before the midsummer ball brought unexpected rain to London, the kind of steady downpour that turned streets into rivers and kept all but the most determined indoors. Amelia had expected a respite from the Duke's campaign, a day to marshal her forces for the final act of their battle. Instead, she found him in her family's drawing room when she descended for tea, already engaged in conversation with her father. Sir Reginald, who had largely ignored the social drama unfolding around his daughter, seemed unusually animated. They were discussing, of all things, a new agricultural technique being tested on one of the Duke's estates, a subject that her father, a devoted improver of his own lands, found fascinating. When Amelia entered, Winterbourne rose but did not immediately approach her. Instead, he continued his conversation with her father, drawing out the older man's opinions with what appeared to be genuine interest. It was only when Lady Westbrook appeared and tea was served that the Duke turned his attention to Amelia, and then only to request that she show him the folio of astronomical charts her father had mentioned. Propriety dictated that they remain within sight of her parents, so they moved to the window alcove where the light was best for examining the charts. As Amelia unrolled the first chart, a detailed mapping of constellation positions throughout the year that she had painstakingly created, she became aware that the Duke was not looking at the paper, but at her. When she glanced up, prepared to deliver another cutting remark about his transparent attempts at courtship, she was arrested by his expression. Gone was the calculated charm, the society mask he wore so well. In its place was something raw, almost vulnerable. He spoke quietly, his words barely audible even to her. He told her he knew about her knowledge of the wager, had known, in fact, since the night at the Countess of Jersey's ball. Lord Ashwood, overcome with guilt, had confessed his indiscretion in revealing the bet. The Duke had expected anger from her, had been prepared for it. What he had not expected was the systematic destruction of his reputation, executed with a precision he could not help but admire, even as it infuriated him. But more than that, he had not expected to find himself genuinely captivated. Her intelligence, which society deemed a flaw, he found intoxicating. Her years as a wallflower had given her an observer's eye that matched his own. She saw through pretense, understood subtext, and played the game of society with a skill that rivaled his own once she chose to engage. He had begun the wager thinking to do her a service, to use his influence to find her a suitable match, collecting his winnings while providing her with security. It was, he had reasoned, a situation where everyone would benefit. What he had not anticipated was that as he spent time in her company, observed her wit, her kindness to those even less fortunate than herself, her genuine passion for learning, he would find himself wanting to be that suitable match. The confession hung between them in the rain-dampened air. Amelia found herself speechless, her carefully prepared defenses crumbling in the face of what appeared to be genuine emotion. But appearances, as she had learned, could be deceiving. She asked with a coolness she did not entirely feel whether this touching revelation was not simply another strategy. The deadline for the wager was tomorrow's ball. How convenient that he should discover genuine feelings just in time to secure his £10,000. The Duke's laugh was bitter. He informed her that he had already conceded the wager that morning, had already paid the sum to Lord Ashwood, who had attempted to refuse it but been overruled. Win or lose no longer mattered. What mattered was that she understand the truth, that whatever had begun as a game had become something far more serious, at least for him. He rose to leave then, pausing only to say that he would be at the midsummer ball tomorrow night. If she would grant him one dance, just one, he would consider it payment for all the distress he had caused her. After that, if she wished, he would never trouble her again. The drawing room felt strangely empty after his departure. Amelia stood at the window, watching his carriage disappear into the rain, the astronomical chart still clutched in her hands. Her mother bustled over, full of questions and speculation, but Amelia barely heard her. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the Duke she thought she knew with the man who had just bared his soul, if indeed that was what had happened. That evening, she made discreet inquiries through her network of overlooked women. The information they provided was illuminating. The Duke had indeed paid the wager that morning before calling on her. More interesting still, he had been observed at his solicitor's office the previous day, making what appeared to be significant changes to his will. And most intriguing of all, he had cancelled a long-standing arrangement to visit his mistress, a beautiful opera dancer who had held his attention for 2 years. The midsummer ball at Vauxhall Gardens was the stuff of fairy tales. Chinese lanterns bobbed in the warm breeze, casting dancing shadows across the paths. The strains of music floated from the pavilion, where couples whirled through country dances and stately minuets. The cream of society had gathered for this final grand event of the season, and speculation was rife about the conclusion of the infamous Winterbourne wager. Amelia arrived with her parents, wearing the same sapphire gown that had caused such a sensation at the Countess of Jersey's ball. But tonight, there was something different about her bearing. Gone was the defensive posture of the wallflower, but absent too was the brittle confidence of recent weeks. She moved through the crowd with a quiet self-possession that drew more attention than either extreme had done. The Duke was already present, standing with a group of gentlemen near the orchestra pavilion. When he saw her, he immediately excused himself and made his way through the crowd. The Ton watched with barely concealed fascination as he approached her, bowed formally, and requested the honor of a dance. The orchestra was preparing for a waltz, that most intimate of dances, still considered slightly scandalous despite its growing acceptance. Amelia hesitated for a moment that felt like eternity, aware that every eye in the garden was upon them. Then, with a slight inclination of her head, she placed her hand in his. They moved onto the floor as the first strains of music began. The Duke's hand at her waist was properly positioned, his frame correct but not rigid. As they began to move, Amelia was struck by how naturally they fit together, how easily they found their rhythm. It was, she realized, a metaphor for everything that had passed between them. Conflict and harmony, deception and truth, all woven into a complex pattern that somehow worked. Neither spoke for the first turn around the floor. Then, as they passed through a patch of shadow between lanterns, the Duke broke the silence. He told her that he had been thinking about their conversation, about truth and deception, about the games society forced them all to play. He had spent his entire adult life maintaining a careful distance from genuine emotion, using his understanding of human nature as a shield rather than a bridge. The wager, he admitted, had been born of arrogance. He had seen her standing alone, season after season, and thought how simple it would be to change her fate with a few well-placed words and strategic introductions. He had not considered that she might not want her fate changed, or at least not by him, not in that way. But then, something unexpected had happened. In trying to know her well enough to manipulate her circumstances, he had actually come to know her. Not the wallflower image she projected, not the spinster society had labeled her, but the woman herself, brilliant, observant, kind, and surprisingly ruthless when provoked. He had lost the wager, he said, but won something far more valuable, the understanding that he had been just as trapped by society's expectations as she had been. His role as the cold, calculating Duke was just as much a prison as her position as the overlooked wallflower. As they turned through another rotation, passing through pools of golden light and soft shadow, Amelia finally spoke. She told him about the years of standing on the sidelines, of watching other girls bloom and fade while she remained constant in her isolation. She had told herself she did not mind, that she preferred her books and studies to the shallow pursuits of the marriage mart. But that had been a lie she told herself to make the rejection bearable. When his attention had suddenly focused on her, she had felt alive in a way she had not experienced before. Even knowing it was false, even recognizing the manipulation, she had reveled in the sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. The anger that followed the revelation of the wager had been as much at herself as at him. Anger that she had allowed herself to hope, to dream, to want something she had convinced herself she did not need. But his actions over the past week, continuing his pursuit even after she had publicly humiliated him, paying the wager before attempting to win it, coming to her with honesty instead of another stratagem, had shown her something unexpected. Perhaps they were both capable of change. Perhaps the roles society had assigned them need not be permanent. The music was drawing to a close. As the Duke led her through the final turns, he made one last confession. He had indeed visited his solicitor, as her intelligence network had no doubt informed her. He had spent the entire previous day drawing up the terms of a marriage settlement, not presuming her acceptance, but preparing for the possibility. The terms he had instructed were unprecedented. She would maintain complete control over her dowry, receive a substantial annual pin money that would be hers unconditionally, and in the event of his death, she would have not just the traditional widow's portion, but full control of several unentailed properties. It was not a bribe, he emphasized, but a demonstration of his understanding that her independence was as valuable as any fortune. Should she refuse him, the documents would be burned. Should she accept, she would enter marriage with more autonomy than any duchess in living memory. The waltz ended, and they stood for a moment in the center of the floor, still holding the position of the dance. Around them, the ton held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would she cut him publicly, delivering the final blow to his reputation? Would he bow and walk away, accepting defeat with aristocratic grace? Instead, Amelia did something that would be talked about for seasons to come. She smiled, not the brittle, calculated smile of recent weeks, but a genuine expression of warmth that transformed her face. Then, in a clear voice that carried across the hushed pavilion, she thanked the Duke for the dance and expressed her hope that he would call on her tomorrow, as there were matters they still needed to discuss. The implication was clear. Miss Amelia Westbrook, the wallflower of 5 seasons, had just publicly indicated her receptiveness to the Duke of Winterbourne's suit. But more than that, she had done so on her own terms, as an equal rather than a supplicant. The Duke's answering smile was radiant. He bowed deeply, promised to call at the appropriate hour, and then, in a gesture that sealed their understanding, he asked if she would honor him with another dance later in the evening. When she agreed, the ton erupted in excited whispers. The wager might have been lost, but something far more interesting had been won. 6 months later, the wedding of the Duke of Winterbourne to Miss Amelia Westbrook was celebrated at St. George's, Hanover Square, with all the pomp befitting a ducal union. But those who attended noted that it was unlike any society wedding they had witnessed before. The bride, radiant in cream silk and ancestral winterborn diamonds, had insisted on walking herself down the aisle, a break with tradition that had horrified some and delighted others. The groom, waiting at the altar, had eyes only for her, his usual aristocratic reserve replaced by undisguised joy. Lord Ashwood served as groomsman, having become, improbably, one of the couple's closest friends. The young lord had used his wager winnings to establish a charity for the education of gentlewomen who, like Amelia, possessed intelligence but lacked the means to fully develop it. It was, he said, the least he could do after inadvertently setting in motion the season's greatest love story. The wedding breakfast was held at Winterbourne House, where the new Duchess had already made her mark. The observatory had been expanded, and weekly scientific salons were now held in the Great Library. The guest lists for these events included not just the usual aristocratic suspects, but scholars, writers, and thinkers, regardless of their social standing, a democratization of intellectual discourse that scandalized some and inspired others. But it was in the private moments, away from society's gaze, that the true victory of their union was evident. The Duke, freed from the prison of his own emotional distance, discovered a capacity for joy he had not known he possessed. The Duchess, no longer relegated to the margins, flourished in a partnership that valued her mind as much as her heart. They would face challenges, of course. Society has a long memory for those who break its rules, even when those rules are arbitrary and cruel. There would be those who whispered that she had trapped him somehow, or that he had married beneath himself. But for every voice of dissent, there were more who saw in their union a different possibility, that marriage could be a meeting of minds as well as an alliance of families, that love could grow from the most unlikely soil. Years later, when their daughter made her debut, she would do so with the confidence of one who had seen that there was more than one way to navigate society's demands. She would know, because her parents had shown her, that sometimes the greatest victories come not from playing by the rules, but from rewriting them entirely. And if that daughter happened to overhear her parents laughing together in the observatory late one night, reminiscing about a wager that had changed their lives, she would understand that the best love stories are often the ones that begin with conflict, are tempered by truth, and ultimately transcend the very circumstances that brought them into being. For in the end, the Duke of Winterbourne had been right about one thing. He could indeed make any woman a duchess. What he had not anticipated was that the right woman would make him something far more valuable, a man capable of genuine love. And Miss Amelia Westbrook, who had spent 5 seasons learning to be invisible, discovered that being seen by the right person was worth more than all the social approval in the world. Their story would be whispered about in drawing rooms for generations, embellished with each telling until it bore only passing resemblance to the truth. But those who had witnessed it firsthand, who had watched 2 people tear down the walls society had built around them and forge something new, knew that the reality was far more romantic than any fiction could ever be. The ton, always hungry for scandal and sensation, moved on to other dramas, other wagers, other unlikely matches. But in a certain townhouse in Grosvenor Square, where astronomical charts shared wall space with portraits and scientific journals lay beside novels on every surface, the Duke and Duchess of Winterbourne continued their greatest experiment of all, proving daily that love, true love, was not about winning or losing, but about finding someone who made you want to be more than society told you to be. And so another tale of hearts united reaches its blessed conclusion. Love, it seems, finds a way even through the strictest conventions of proper society, transforming what began as a heartless wager into the most sincere of attachments. For in matters of the heart, as in all things, the greatest risk often yields the greatest reward.